about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my road shop niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day pimping America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclosed Vic homes at the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas to get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me a billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children's children.
All right, folks, welcome to UCY.TV, Voice of Rebellion. Tonight with Jay, we have Tom Lockavar Stewart from Resurrect the Republic, Dirty Uncle Sam, Truth Radio broadcast. Tom's a friend of mine. We spent a lot of time together out in Bunkerville, so he'll be joining us along here directly, I reckon. And we're going to talk about, from Bill to Burns. That's the Bundy boys and all the folks that have been involved along that. So we'll walk through that some. Hey, Chris, how you doing, brother?
Hey, everybody. This is Chris J. coming to you here from St. Petersburg, Florida right now. And before the show starts, a little shout out to local people right now that we are about to experience some pretty rough conditions. This is completely unrelated to the topic of the show, but I just want to put that out there. If you are 2 blocks or so from the water, as we experience Tropical Storm Colin moving onshore the next 24 hours, if you're within 2 blocks of the water, don't take a risk. Make sure you have something ready to deal with the flooding. And if you need power, make plans in case the power goes out, because as you know, Florida's power grid is not the best, and we lose power very easily despite the fact that we have this tropical threat all the time. This won't be too strong of a storm, at least that's what they're predicting now, but keep updated on the weather updates, and because things do change quite often. There's been some major errors with hurricane predictions before. Just remember what happened with Charlie, that at the last second that thing turned in to Punta Gorda rather than Tampa, and they got a Cat 4 rather than us getting a Cat 4 that time. So things could go a different way than expected right now. Literally within hours, things can change. So stay updated on that. And talk about the Bundys tonight. And we have, of course, Tom Larakova that's going to be part of our show. Well, you know, the Bundys, they came into a lot of controversy in the alternative media, and ultimately in the national media were heavily demonized under both events. Back when back in Nevada and in Burns, Oregon, they had the 2 standoffs with Cliven Bundy and then later Amon Bundy leading the standoff in Burns, Oregon against the Bureau of Land Management. Occupying a Bureau of Land Management building to protest the arrest of the Hammonds, who were being held now that had been over 5 years. They had been held for burning, doing a controlled burn on their own property, which the federal government claimed to be their property. The Bundys, just endless, relentless criticism was about them in many different parts of the media, alternative media, and these people have been painted out to be something that appears that they're not. As what I've seen with my own observations is that they've been called racist, they've been called extremists because they exercise their Second Amendment in a protest against the government. And protect the First Amendment of what they were doing. And yes, they did occupy a government building that was abandoned, and it wasn't like they took anybody hostage, which I think was in the original reports. Remember that, Vince? Yeah, I think in the first 2 days there were some media outlets, or there was this info confusion going out that there was hostages apparently, which there weren't no hostages. And these about 150 men were crowded into the Bundy, or were counted into the Bureau of Land Management building. Was the Bundy's heading this? Now, Amon Bundy, Cliven Bundy, who wasn't even at the Burns, Oregon event, but was put in connection to this, was arrested. Amon Bundy was arrested. Lavoy Finicum was the tragic events that happened with him, where he was surrendering, and they said that he was going to pull a gun, and they killed him, shooting him many times and fatal shot in the head. And we saw, a lot of us saw the clips of the what surrounded the shooting of Lavoy Finicum, but you can obviously see that he's surrendering, and some say that he even sacrificed himself because it looked at the Bureau of Land Management were going to kill one of them, and that Lavoy Finicum chose to be the one that was going to be surrendering, which put him in the path of danger, and he was killed in the process. And the gun, they said that he had a gun on him, but in the end, the truth was, it appears that it came back as a stolen firearm, and not connected to him. And it appeared that was probably a plant, as it's the oldest cop trick in the world when doing a shady killing, is they just say he had a gun on him and you have a plant gun. I mean, a lot of cops still carry to this day a plant gun on them, especially when dealing with a case like this, where they might have to go to some questionable tactics in order to get the job, quote unquote, done. Lavoy Finicum was killed. Ryan Bundy was injured, but only was slight injury. But it was, and the few of them were arrested afterwards. The Bundys, they got a lot of hate from a lot of sides, and even alternative media people were calling them racist. They were saying stuff like that, that there were pretty much welfare whores because they had collected a lot of money or subsidies from the government, apparently, to do their ranching. And they said that Lavoy Finicum's actions were justifiable to have shot Lavoy Finicum at the end.
Hey, Tom. Chris, we got...
Hey, what's up, brothers?
Right on. Yeah, we got Thomas Robert.
And here's our guest, Tom, right here.
I'm right here, man.
All the way from Texas to Voice of Rebellion Radio tonight. And, I was just doing a little brief of the whole Bundy standoff back in January at Burns, Oregon, and just in general, talk about all the basics and Lavoy Finicum, and just going over people that were arrested, Cliven Bundy, Amon Bundy. But great to have you on the show.
Good to be here, man. Good to be anywhere.
Yeah. Well, with all this that happened, there's been all these accusations that were thrown at the Bundys and just all the other people that were involved with the Burns, Oregon standoff. One thing I wanted to ask very early into the into the whole interview is, was it true that the Bundys were collecting a significant amount of money from the government in order to do the ranching? Because that's been one of the main charges, or one of the main things that people have been saying in the media against them, is they're saying that they were relying on the government, and in the end they turned on the government. But
let me speak real quick.
Let me wait. Hold on a second. Let me clarify something. They never turned on the government because we are the government. The people in Washington, D.C. allegedly are supposed to be our representatives. There is a difference. See, today we have been so propagandized by Marxists and Trotskyists on both sides. You have the Marxists on the left, you have the Trotskyites on the neoconservative movement. By the way, if you go to my website and type in Trotskyite, neoconservative, an article will pop up that shows you that the founders of the original neoconservative movement in the 30s were admitted and openly Trotskyites. So you have to understand that both parties have been infested by a version of Karl Marx's communism. In fact, Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War was writing back and forth through his emissaries through Karl Marx. Karl Marx praised Abraham Lincoln and his revolution. So if you can understand that aspect of things that were not ever taught, you'll also understand that there is no way that Bundy could have been acting out in an anti-government fashion except for one thing, and that is the jurisdiction. The jurisdiction, and they were absolutely correct when they said you must end your consent to contract with the federal government, but they more importantly focused on the BLM only. Now, to make you understand how important this is, I just sent a link to Vincent. It's called Reconstruction, Replacement Government, and Consent to Contract with the Federal Government via U.S. 14th Amendment Citizenship. At the time of the Civil War, when the Civil War was ended, Abraham Lincoln admitted the southern states back into the Union. This is very important as for jurisdiction in Oregon. When that occurred, they were lawful representatives of the Union. The war was over. Andrew Johnson preceded Lincoln when he was shot. By the way, the two guards that were on Lincoln's door were Union soldiers that were handpicked allegedly by General Grant. General Grant was invited to go with Abraham Lincoln to Ford's Theater that very night, and it is highly unusual for a general in a time of a victory in war to say no to a president on a personal invitation. General Grant immediately left Washington, D.C., declining Lincoln's invitation. He went to Trenton, I believe it was Trenton, New Jersey, for a day. Lincoln was shot, and he immediately returned. Secretary of State, Secretary of the War, William Stanton, was also allegedly knifed, but survived. And immediately following that, the Reconstruction Act were forced by military despotism. Now, the link that I sent you, which is a good link, I just opened it up, just try again, has an image. You can also go to rtrtruthmedia.com. rtrtruthmedia.com. You will find a document. It's the photo of a document. If you click on this document, it will show you that the state of Oregon not only realized that this is an unlawful jurisdiction of military despotism, but they rescinded their ratification of said amendment. That means basically that the jurisdiction that the federal government, the BLM, all of them are acting upon is unlawful. It is created by military despotism, and there is no way around it. I'm clicking on the I'm clicking on the link so that I can read for you the words by these representatives themselves. And whereas the newly constituted and newly established bodies availing themselves to be and acting as legislatures respectively of the states of Arkansas, Florida, North Carolina, Louisiana, South Carolina, Alabama, and Georgia, were created by a military despotism against the will of the legal voters of said states under the Reconstruction Act so-called of Congress, which are usurpations, unconstitutional, revolutionary, and void, and consequently the acts of such bodies cannot legally ratify the said proposed constitutional amendment for the states which they pretend to represent nor affect the rights of other states of the Union. And this is where it's most critical. The Reconstruction Acts, including the 14th Amendment, even though it was unlawful, was only intended to be a jurisdiction for the 11 rebel southern states in punishment. They go on to admit on the congressional record, on the congressional globe, that the 14th Amendment and the Reconstruction Acts were a punishment. So I ask anyone out there, if they were a punishment to 11 rebel states, then why is the same jurisdiction being enforced in a state of Oregon that rescinded said amendment, had right to rescind said amendment, and that is the jurisdiction that the BLM, the Department of the Interior, the Drug Enforcement Agency, and every other alphabet soup creation of that federal behemoth that's supposed to be contained, where Bundy said absolutely correctly, within a 10-mile square, how come the law itself is being ignored? Now, in closing, it goes on to say the Oregon House Resolution, and whereas on the 6th day of October, 1866, the House of Representatives of the state adopted a resolution declaring that the action of that body in ratifying the said proposed constitutional amendment did not express the will of the said House of the state of Oregon as it then stood after being purged of its illegal members. Therefore, be it resolved by the Legislature Assembly of the State of Oregon that the above recited resolution adopted by Legislative Assembly on the 19th day of September 1866 by fraud being same is hereby rescinded, and the ratification on behalf of the State of Oregon and the above recited proposed amendment to the Constitution of the United States is hereby withdrawn and refused. The entire action that the federal government took upon those patriots was criminal in nature, and it was based on a jurisdiction that was unlawful and usurped. End of story.
Bravo.
Hey, let me say to your original question there, Chris, whether they were welfare recipients. And Ryan Bundy, I watched him this morning, Mike Bluehair, one of his videos, which he's got a lot of good ones. He interviewed Ryan, and then later we see where Ryan addresses this, that his accusation that he had taken free meals at school. So you might find that on YouTube. I'll go retrieve the link if for the listeners, and I'll post it. But no, he did not. And to say that rights like the grass rights, the feed rights, there's water rights, there's mineral rights, there's rights for people to walk across the land, to enjoy four-wheeling. So the Bureau of Land Management has claimed a ownership over the American land. So this is where the question comes in. Not that BLM does not own the land, but they act like they did, and they ran all the other ranchers out of business.
They can own the land.
Say again, Tom?
Yes. The Bureau of Land Management.
They're not constitutionally allowed to own anything more outside that 10-mile square than for sports and needful buildings, not federal monuments of millions of acres of land. It does not say that. If we understand the Constitution and restriction upon government, it gives us nothing. The Constitution is a contract. It gives us, and whenever I hear people say you have a Second Amendment right, it makes me angry, because that's part of the propaganda that they want you to believe. The Constitution gives us nothing. Nothing. If you forgot the Constitution tomorrow, our natural rights were granted through the Magna Carta. Our founders declared independence based upon the Magna Carta, and the Magna Carta is cited by the U.S. Supreme Court, even their martial law jurisdiction, some 187 times. The rights that we have come from God, your creator, however it is you want to believe it, and you have to be religious or spiritual. You can see it however you want. Your human nature, however you want to put it. I'm a Christian, comes from God for me, comes from your humanity, however else you decide it. But this contract, we're not enforcing the proper contract. Americans have been led to believe that the Constitution gives you something. It's a restriction upon government, and we're not using it. That's the problem.
Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. Is that the Constitution was wrote to prevent the government from ever reaching the size that the British government, in comparison, had reached over there in England. But of course, it doesn't give anything. It's just restricting what the government can do, and of course, your rights are God-given, or whatever you want to see it, outside of a religious tone. And I think it's just Bureau of Land Management itself and what it's became, and all these other organizations controlling rural America, and all these organizations is controlling the rest of America. Now we have 150 150 agencies that are either armed or have an armed division of them, including organizations such as the EPA and even park rangers and stuff that you wouldn't even expect. In the last 20 years, it all became part. All became armed, and it's part of the Agenda 21 plan in order to control rule over America in the future and herd us all into urban population centers that can be controlled by whatever organization they decide to be to put in charge
hold on.
These cities.
Let me clarify something in there. It's not whatever organization that they choose to. It's whatever organization that they've made treaty with. If you read the Constitution, I forget the exact section, it declares that all treaties entered into by the United States are protected by the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution. So if you understand that the Constitution that they are going by right now is not the original Constitution that was created by the founders originally. As a matter of fact, in 1871, they created another government that basically put that old republic to rest, if it even existed past the Civil War in anything more than name only. And what they did, the jurisdiction that they've enforced is not, since signing with the United Nations, and all of you guys, I'm sure you're familiar with the federal government's involvement in the treaties with the United Nations, John Kerry signing this UN Small Arms Disarmament Treaty. We are no longer being governed by our representatives. We are being governed by the United Nations through proxy. And our president, or if you even call him that, not our president, but the corporation's president, is now sitting on the United Nations Security Council, which is in gross manifest violation of anything constitutional. He's not allowed to sit on any foreign body. Even under their corporate bylaws, their rules, he has now become a complete monarch. Christiane Hall is absolutely correct in describing the presidency of Bush and many others before them, and Obama certainly to be a monarchical role.
At this point, yes, the president is not representing any person in the United States. They're just representing a few corporate bodies that are in charge of the United States, or claim to be in charge of the United States. And the truth is that at this point, it's really the people that control the currency of the United States are the ones that are control the people behind the Federal Reserve. Ultimately, they are the ones that's the control of how everything, all the medium of all purchases. Even though that if we were to start bartering, that could be one way that we could interfere with their plans. And yes, after the Civil War, if you look at it, it definitely was instigated from powers far away. For example, you could see the British and French and the bankers from that side that were planning to split apart the United States and the Republic of the United States in order to retake the power that had been lost after the American Revolution. So the fingerprints are all there. And and the UN Small Arms Treaty, I remember when it was actually going through the Senate and the Congress, whether to be ratified or not, but if I'm not mistaken, well, didn't it actually not pass the Senate?
What's that?
The UN Small Arms Treaty. I remember when that was going through the Senate and Congress. I remember it got stopped at the Senate, I believe. I think it fell
it
in
didn't
5
get
votes
stopped by
ratified.
anything. Obama ordered John Kerry to sign it, and as an act of absolute treason to the true republic, that son of a gun signed it. It did go through. That's the whole problem. It didn't go through Congress. It didn't go through the House. It didn't go through the Senate. It was signed by an emissary of His Highness Obama, completely in gross violation of everything that we stand for. But by doing so, the corporate United States, U.S. Incorporated de facto, however you want to look at it, because the jurisdiction is unconstitutional, has done this acting as and in our behalf. The problem with this is really when we take this, we could take this back to right to Washington D.C. But I'm trying to stick to Oregon and the Oregon situation and how this applies to them. The jurisdiction that the federal government is acting under out in the state of Oregon, specifically in Nevada, is based upon U.S. citizenship, not your citizenship of your nation, which, by the way, the United States is not a country, it's not a nation, it's a union. Just like the European Union. You wouldn't call the European Union a country or a nation. That is communist propagandizing indoctrination that led us into a nationalistic attitude to erode states' boundaries and the ideas that states were nations, so that we all assumed a one identity, so that one identity eventually could be usurped into the greater one world government. It's a path that was taken by Albert Pike defined this in his position on 3 world wars. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, actually, I know the letter that he wrote in 1871.
Right. Yes, and he laid all of this out, even the creation of the State of Israel, and that World War II was going to bring about it by certain measures, and World War III would be between the political Zionists and the Arab world. This is, of course, being fomented by fraud and Hegelian dialectic, false flags. That's why 9/11, why you find out that there was intergovernmental agency involvement, why there was one FBI agent who we had on the we run a clip on the show the other night, an FBI agent coming forward saying, I uncovered that what he uncovered was their cover story, because both our government and the Israeli government, most probably the British government, were all in on that at the intelligence levels. It was to trigger this war on terrorism, to do exactly what Albert Pike said needed to be done, which was the destabilization of the Middle East into sectarian states that would become weakened and eroded, so to push what they call the Greater Israel Project, because they knew that if Israel expanded, it would so inflame the Arab world that the Arab world would have to strike back. This is what they're trying to foment, and it's all being done unnaturally by plan. It's not any kind of prophecy or anything like that. Of course, there are some prophecies that match with it, but I'm not going by that. I'm going by the factual, documented information, the Congressional Globe, U.S. government documents, and the words that these men said. And if you just go by the information, and no third parties, no conspiracy theories, this is all been told to us what they're going to do. It's amazing to me that more people don't grasp, like you obviously have. You're familiar with it.
There's, with Albert Pike's letter, there's only, the one thing that it's like at the end, and I find it hard to believe that will happen, is that they had the plan, because how I see it, and how I've seen it for a long time, is that Israel is definitely seems to be, the Israeli government seems to be a higher level of power than the U.S. government, this whole world order scheme. And yes, there's the Rothschilds above that, but Israel, I don't think they're going to have it destroyed in the end. I have a feeling that it's going to be still, or at least until the one world government is created at the end, if they get that far. I'm under the assumption that they'll be defeated at one point or another. I'm not going to be the pessimist that's going to sit here and say that's going to happen. I believe that their plans are going to be thwarted at one point or another in the next.
Well, it can be. It very well. You're very correct in that it can be, and maybe enough people are waking up, because Obama tried his push in Syria, and now you're finding out that that Benghazi was all about running arms to basically our enemies. So that makes them completely guilty of treason. But anyway, beside the point, you find out that he's trying to foment this war in Syria, which goes in lockstep with this plan that these Freemasons have been involved with since the beginning. Now you can say, well, I don't know if it was really a plan, but if you read Albert Pike's words that were written in 1871. It matches exactly. As a matter of fact, you mind if I read these words real quick?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, World War III. This is by General Albert Pike, Confederate general who had a Jesuit next to him. By the way, all this goes through Rome. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agenture of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. This is on World War III. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arab world, and political Zionism, the State of Israel, which wasn't created yet, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. We shall unleash nihilists The nihilists, what you're seeing in Black Lives Matter and these other Marxist groups, the KKK and other things like that, popping up to foment racial and class wars, and the atheists. And we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effects of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then, everywhere, the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, Black Lives Matter, and Black Panther Party, will exterminate those destroyers of civilization. And a multitude disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out into the public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time, August 15th, 1871. Now, can anybody tell me that this is not exactly what we see playing out in front of our faces?
Oh yeah, it's been set to run for quite some time, for sure.
Well, they piss me off.
Easily.
But do you ever wonder though? I mean, why does it seem like you're allowed to talk about the Freemasons in this country and in a lot of the Western world, and people will actually listen to your theories? You know, how I've seen the Masons for a long time is that there might be a somewhat of power, but I think they are somewhat almost a cover group, or just are the real people are well further in the shadows. For example, who can't you criticize in this country? The Zionists, and they call you anti-Semitic, or the Nazis. You get so much more hate if you're talking about the Freemasons. You know, the Freemasons you've been able to talk about them since people have entertained theories since the 50s or 60s, and about the total control of everything and the sacred geometry and all that stuff has been quite common knowledge for a long time. But even
it's
longer,
the Babylonian cult, my friend. What it is, and I can explain it very easily because I come from essentially, if you want to call it that, an Illuminati bloodline. All right, my father was a judge. He was connected to some very important and very powerful people. And I can tell you that I can explain the Freemasons exactly like I explain the FBI and many other governmental agencies. Picture a Rubik's Cube with only black squares in the center and white squares on the outside. Everything compartmentalized. They draw to the top those most ambitious, those that will, they groom from the lower ranks. The lower ranks they use as a buffer. They do not know what's going on above them, and most of those folks are the ones that are involved in the charitable works and all of the civic deeds, and it gives them a buffer zone of good guy, and in the inner sanctum, it's mystery. Well, it's not mystery what's in the inner sanctum. And we read the writings of these 33rd degree Masons and higher. I have friends who are Freemasons, who at this point we're still struggling with, because they have a lot of good friends who are also Freemasons, very good people, nice people, normal like you and I. They joined a fraternity, and that's how they look at it, to make good men better, all that kind of stuff. And it does, but what they do is they put people, for instance, my friend became a Freemason, and immediately following becoming a Freemason, he became a cop. He was offered that job through his association in Freemasonry. Now, there were other applicants that were ahead of him. This is the example on how they handpick, and then they leave you at certain levels. Now, if my friend were to demonstrate qualities that they think would be more appropriate to the higher levels, he would have shot very quick. But he's been at the same level for a very long time, maintains his job, he's a good guy, and that's the way it goes. It's a compartmentalized organization. It's built upon a Babylonian faith of Moloch worship. I mean, look at the Bohemian Grove, the 40-foot statue of Moloch. That is Freemasonry.
Let me rein you back in here, because this is a pretty in-depth subject that could go on. And let's come back to what is facing the Bundys,
Yep.
other folks, many that you and
Yep.
I know together personally. Let's go back to the Bundys. So they came and went up the hills there to tear down some water tanks, and of course that when they come down and Ammon stopped them, and Dave was there and others. So we go on to jurisdiction. Let's go back here to talking about the BLM and their claim, because there's no invoice, there's no bill that's ever been sent for the supposed $1 million that they owe. So what is the situation we're looking at now? Because we've got Cliven Bundy and Ammon and Ryan, who's there, Pete Santilli, who all's back in Vegas, and then still in Oregon, like Jason Patrick. Great guy. You and I both know him, and what a true man he is.
And just a journalist too.
Yeah, just a journalist.
I never remember seeing Jason Patrick ever with a firearm. Jason Patrick, he just walked around with his video recorder and is doing his. He was just collecting information, and that's a First Amendment protected activity. So we see gross violations, in my opinion. I mean, how much more First Amendment can you get being a documentarian?
So what's a legal issue right here? Because jurisdiction has a lot to do with this, and I'm waiting for somebody in chat over here to maybe I get this here. But anyways, I'm waiting for a little add in here. As far as jurisdiction, and accepting an attorney, which means you're incompetent. So when you hear a plea, when you accept or understand the dictates, the rights that are given to you in the court, you become part of that jurisdiction. Now, where they're being charged at now is more of the administrative courts. It's the financial aspect, and we see that they're, like Chris was saying, how many agencies are now armed. So they bring to bear armed men to steal, and without actually having any crime that was actual crime that was committed. When we look
well, that's the military jurisdiction that we're technically, and in every real sense, we are under the same martial jurisdiction that we were under at the conclusion of the Civil War when they instituted the Reconstruction Act. We are the administrative law that they're following right now is martial law. The building of local police forces that started looking kind of like Andy Griffith was the foot in the door and the normalization process of where they wanted to go. First of all, we don't need a police force in every town. We may need some in the cities. I might agree that you would need a constabulary. But if you notice, even in Great Britain, for the longest time, their bobbies were not even armed. If there was ever a situation that required guns, they had a very special detachment that would be ordered out. That falls more in line with the Magna Carta, and it was supposed to be some of a guide stone of how we were supposed to be. Our sheriffs, which many people say, why is the sheriff the most powerful law enforcement official or official in any given county, when the Constitution doesn't even refer to the sheriff? But we know that we've had sheriffs for far longer than we've had corporate police agencies. So the answer to that is, going back to the same, if you were to read Magna Carta, the Magna Carta describes the job and the jurisdiction of the sheriff very clearly. He's an elected representative of the people, and as such, he's the highest ranking official in that county. Well, the governor may have certain powers, but when it comes to the governor, if the governor is in collusion with the federal government, then that's their de facto federal jurisdiction that they're acting upon. So that really means that the sheriff in each county has the highest, he's the last say in that county. This all goes back to Magna Carta law. So unless they want to say, oh, well, for 140 years, we were wrong and there is no such thing as a sheriff, which take 140 years of constitutional jurisprudence and try and chuck it out the window, good luck. But the argument with Sheriff Mack when he won against Clinton is the way they went around him eventually. He did have victory, but the way they went around him is via U.S. citizenship. The federal jurisdiction was created by the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment was never lawfully ratified. Until this truth is told, until this truth is understood, we're never going to be free unless you individually, and there is a process by doing this, and I'm not at liberty to discuss that tonight, but maybe another conversation. There is a process by which you can withdraw yourself completely out of the system. However, there come pitfalls and obstacles with all of these things, but our founders, what they're trying to tell us is that we needed to be able to govern ourselves, each individual. And what the government has done through government indoctrination centers they call public schools, and even private universities that use the government curriculum, is they've completely dumbed down the populace in how to do that and how to claim their natural rights. So there you have it.
All the ways that we've got to where we are now, if we can decide to address those wrongs where they come individually, you're looking at sheriffs that have been having interaction with federal agencies for a very long time now. They come in, They offer sweetheart deals, and then they kind of lock them into contract. So they interact on a regular basis, especially with the drug war. So the convolution is that whatever the feds say, then the sheriffs most generally are going to say, yeah, well, sure enough. Now, what we need to do is how do we
I want to visit something that Tom said here is that about the withdrawing from the system is that I see these people and talk about from the sui juris law and the guy who wrote that the name eludes me right now, but I actually was Facebook friends for a long time with his cousin until we got into quite a bit of a personal disagreement, and he ultimately went into pretty ugly tactics to attack me in the end, and I found that to be completely unacceptable. So I'm pretty sure I didn't block him. But anyways, that's beside the fact. You think that the same government in the same system that will kill a man surrendering on the road, like what happened there in Burns, Oregon, or all these many other events, that's just really not even the tip of the iceberg. That's a microscopic element of the iceberg. That if you just file out the different papers to the federal government or to what the organizations that you need to in order to claim your natural rights, that they're actually going to accept that in the long run and they're actually going to behave as such. Because to me, it doesn't believe that they're going to follow that procedure when they don't follow the procedure on anything else regarding any kind of human rights, Constitution, none of that.
Well, see, this isn't about the 10-mile square or their army. It's not about that. It's about hearts and minds. I was trained a long time ago by a Green Beret lieutenant colonel when I went to military academy, and he was a good mentor. And one thing that he taught me was, and he was fully aware of the unlawful nature of the federal government. He said the only way that it would be won hearts and minds many years. And there have been many individuals, such as, I'm just one of them, Bruce Ray Riggs, Thomas Mick, the fellow who wrote the Writ Amendment, Beckman, so many more. We're not alone, but here's the thing. You're absolutely right. They're not going to accept it readily and easily. And there are a lot of nihilists already being created by all of these universities. We see all these little Marxist movements. We also see the opposing side that's standing up to it, who's actually starting to gain some ground now, being led by people who are more of a neoconservative bent, which we all know was taken over by the Trotskyites a long time ago. So here's the good news. The good news is that this information is rising to very high levels now. I am at liberty to say as much that one of our staff members are going to be meeting with people near Washington, D.C. very shortly, and that they're going to deliver this information to them. Also, I have delivered this information to the New Jersey campaign manager of Donald Trump. Now, I have my own feelings about Trump, but I was curious to see what would happen. 2 weeks after delivering the information to his attorneys and his New Jersey campaign staff, Donald Trump came out stating that the anchor babies were not covered, that they're not, it's not constitutional, and that his lawyers take it from good advice that it is not. Now, keep in mind, his lawyers go by the law, and the law is on the public record. Now, this is why this document that I have from Oregon is so very important. Once this declaration was made, it was rejected by Washington, but in the state of Oregon, it was never challenged. It sat on its books for 50 years. That gives it the full force and weight of the law. All we need are some courageous and honorable people to go out and spread this information, spread this word, send it to your courthouses, send a copy of it to your judges, let them know that we know. Go meet with your law enforcement officials, because you know what? Most of those fellows are good men. They don't know the system. They don't comprehend the system that they're actually serving. Put this information in their hand. Let them read it. Explain it to them if they don't understand it. And if you guys need to, I'll take all the time in the world to go over it with you and send you our information, and I'll answer any questions that I can for you. But this is the answer. This is a peaceful remedy that can take D.C. essentially, if we can, and this, nothing's easy. And freedom isn't free. It's just not. You have to work for it. So if we can do this and get to enough important people and stop with these little local struggles are good, but you need to go to your sheriff and put this information in his hand. What about this? What makes this lawful? Why are you supporting an unlawful action? And explain to them how it's unlawful. I've talked to so many sheriffs after presenting this to them for the first time that are completely frickin' blown away. They had no idea. If you don't know, how are you supposed to fall in line with the Constitution? How are you supposed to respect people's natural rights if you don't know that they were stolen 140 years ago?
Yeah, that's a good point you make there about a lot of the people involved in the law enforcement in the United States, but are good people that would be pretty blown away if they actually knew the system that we're serving, the vileness of the system that they're serving. But I feel like that number is dwindling via a few things. For example, that the amount of your Andy Griffiths police officers are almost a thing of the past, and the college education, in quotation education, that they make them go through is pretty much the conditioning to turn them into from protecting and serving to completely just law enforcement, as the Supreme Court made the ruling officially, the last hurdle, I guess, 11 years ago, that the official purpose of police officers in the United States will now be to just enforce whatever laws are wrote on the books by the politicians. The idea that a peaceful solution, though, is possible to me, it just dwindles day by day when I see that these more and more peaceful events, somebody gets shot, somebody gets injured, I had one time Cecily McMillan, who was brutalized in a protest in New York City, during Occupy Wall Street, and she was charged for assault and went through a legal battle that spanned years, and she ended up becoming actually up on the headlines of the national news because it became a big event that she fought for, and then went through a lot of other cases and such. But I see more and more cases of stuff like this. A police officer shoots somebody at a peaceful protest, or in other Western countries, such as Britain or France, very comparable to the situation in the United States. So do you truly believe that this can all fall apart, that what they built, this deck of cards that spans 10 miles high, that if we do a few peaceful maneuvers, that's all going to fall down?
Well, I can tell you this, to answer your question as honestly as I can, and I have to do it both in a real-world sense and a spiritual sense. First of all, whether you have listeners who are atheists or Jewish or whatever they are, or Christian, I'm a Christian, and I go by, I've separated myself when I did my research, and this is what I found. because I both did the research essentially as not atheistic, but without the interpretation of my faith, and then I redid the research with the interpretation of my faith. I found both the same. Founders declared independence based upon what the authority they derived in the Magna Carta. This cannot be disputed. I mean, anybody, all they need to do is Google Magna Carta in American jurisprudence. You can find all the evidence you want for that to sustain my position in that. Now, let's ask ourselves, there's an architecture, framework, and law, and they do have to follow rules, by the way. That's a long story. We'll get into that in a minute if you want. But so the law is founded upon the Magna Carta. Well, the Magna Carta is founded upon the King James Version of the Bible. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're Muslim, Christian, doesn't matter, because according to the Christian faith, you have a right to free choice, free will. That is where our religious liberty came from, by the way. That's why when many people tell you this is a Christian nation, but 95% of people who say that believe that it's a Christian nation for all the wrong reasons. It has nothing to do with what our founders believed. It has nothing to do with what they thought. Some of them were atheists, some of them were deists, some of them were Christian. What it has to do with the framework of law. So it goes King James Version of the Bible, 1611 Bible, Magna Carta, Declaration, Articles of Confederation, which, by the way, are still law. They were never replaced. They were added to. Another thing that we Americans have been brainwashed out of the information of. And then you have our Constitution. Well, when they committed this act in 1868, by the way, 2 years prior to before they did this, Congress redefined two different words to have the same meaning, person and citizen, and they added the term corporation. This brought admiralty law onto the land. This made everything in a corporate or commercial capacity rather than based upon your natural God-given rights. What they essentially did was they created a jurisdiction in D.C. It took everyone, no matter where they were. If you sign a driver's license and underneath of it says, I am a U.S. citizen, it's an adhesion contract. Every time you contract with the federal government for a service by your consent, you're agreeing to the U.S. District of Columbia jurisdiction. That's why I had to allow my license to expire. Let me tell you a quick story about that. I am now 3 for 3 in court. Every time, 3 times in New Jersey, one of the most communist states in the nation. Okay, in reality, and there's police everywhere. 3 different times. I'll give you one example. I was coming out of a Taco Bell. My mom was sick. And she had cancer. So I was driving my mom to get her something to eat. We were pulling out of the parking lot, and somebody rear-ended me. It was a young black woman. She was nice enough, but we called the police just to make a report. My license had expired. When the officer asked me if I had my license, I said, no, I think I left it at home in my wallet, but it's expired. And he said, well, why haven't you gotten a new one? I said, because I don't consent to U.S. 14th Amendment citizenship jurisdiction. I said, do you understand what that means? He said, no, not really, but it sounds kind of like that sovereign stuff. I said, don't get all trapped up on the FBI reports. It has nothing to do with that. That's a concoction. It's an oxymoron. I said, I'll see you in court. Just write me a ticket. So he wrote me a ticket, and I went to court. And I stood up in front of the judge, and he asked me, when he called out my name, I basically told him that I was there to represent myself, or to present myself on that matter, and he didn't ask me any question, didn't buck an eye, kind of looked up at me, and he said, well, how do you plead? And I said, well, first of all, we have an established subject matter. Second of all, I'm here based upon a citizenship that I have rejected by my own political choice. He looked up and he pulled his glasses down and he said, what jurisdiction is that? And I said, 14th Amendment U.S. citizenship, sir. He said, sit down. Now, I had to wait there for 3 hours until everyone else was gone. And he said, come on back up. And he said, dismissed, have a nice day. Brother, there's judges out there who are honorable. There are police officers out there who are honorable.
I know with driver's license and the common traveler laws, oftentimes those are the most successful ones I've noticed, especially like in a traffic stop scenario. There's YouTube videos and such. Many people that have been able to, say all the things regarding fiction, and they get dismissed or sent on
they're
their way.
getting hit with a shitload. They're getting hit with a bunch of disinformation. They're walking in there like fools, trying to all of these different terms that they're using. A lot of them, I'm telling you, that the entire movement, the truth movement, is infested with disinformation. It is not that complicated. When you start spouting off all those things that I hear these freemen on the land and all these folks spouting off, half of what they're saying is nonsense. That's the problem. People are not keeping it simple, keeping it to the documented facts and evidence that they can throw down in front of the judge that comes from these government's own records. If you can do that, one thing that you have is honor. The next thing that you have is, for most judges who spent any time at all studying our history, you will have respect. I've seen it now 3 times. 3 times I went in without arguing with the officer, without arguing with the judge, being absolutely, polite, respectable, and standing my ground based upon my political choice. I didn't make it complicated. I didn't do the whole, I'm Tom of the family, of the clan Stewart, of whatever. I just, I'm here to present myself on that map. Period. End of story, and this is why. And here's the documented factual evidence. This came from the congressional record, and I have about 4 different states to confirm that I'm right. Now, unless he's going to enter that into the court record, which I assure you that he does not want to do, I have not seen hardly any of these videos on YouTube of anybody who has done it like that. So I have to assume that a lot of these guys are either they've gotten some of our information and they've been hit by some misinformation sources, and they are basically being used to make us all look stupid. Now, if you see any mainstream media coverage of people that they'll all declare me a sovereign citizen, although that's an oxymoron, the people that they have that they interview, like the one dude that RT interviewed, even with the dreadlocks that couldn't even, the guy looked like he had just taken about 6 bong hits to the face, but these are the people that they interview. They don't interview me. They don't interview Bruce Doucette. They don't interview Anna von Ritz. They don't interview people who have done their historical research, no matter how far out there you may think these people are for what they're trying to do. What these people are trying to do is to bring back the lawful process that our founders gave to us. That cannot be denied. They can be denied by these federal courts, but the research is spot on. So there you have it.
We'll rewind a little bit to something that you talked about earlier in the show. And, we're talking about the progression from, if you go back, our Articles of Confederation prior to that, Declaration of Independence, Constitution, and you go all the way back to the, Constitution was after Articles of Confederation. Go back to Magna Carta, and then they said that was based off the King James Version of the Bible. Now, I just want to state that maybe we shouldn't be basing our code of morality and law off of what is not a Christian book. If you look at who wrote that book, the man that was immoral.
I hear you, but I have to stop you. Hold on a second. Sir, this is the problem. It has nothing to do with what you personally believe in, what you think things should be based upon, opinion, ideology. What I'm telling you is the legal framework that was used, history, the legal architecture of the Christian Republic, and it was a Christian Republic. Whether it's no longer, you can debate, it's a corporation. Now, the founding of our nation was based upon that legal framework. Now, we can say, well, back in 1774, they should not have, or you could go back to the declaring of independence and say, well, the founders should have never drawn their authority to declare independence based upon the Magna Carta. But they did. The Magna Carta's legal framework is the 1611 King James Version of the Holy Bible. Forget the religion. Forget the God and the Jesus and all that other stuff. It is a law book. that they refer to throughout the Magna Carta into the Constitution. Our rights come from our Creator and that belief system and that built legal architecture. If you tear that down, the only other authority that exists is the government because they're stronger than you. You see the point? That's why they use this process to declare it cannot be taken from you if you just apply the law. Whether or not you're a Christian is irrelevant. You don't need to be a Christian to be Muslim. And if you'll find most Muslims also in their own Arabic worlds and their Arabic constitutions, all go back historically to the Quran. Now, we're not going to get into the whole Muslim thing. I'm not, but you understand it's a legal framework of a jurisdiction. Okay? It's no more, no less. Now, the subversion of the process is the problem. And the subversion of the process is when you lead people to believe one thing, and then you do something else by means of deception, you've committed fraud. That is what the 14th Amendment was. Because they were not honest with the American people, nor many of the representative states. Many of the representative states found out what they were doing, which in Section 4 of the 14th Amendment created the jurisdiction that would be handed to the Federal Reserve. It essentially made every single U.S. citizen responsible for the public debt and made that unquestionable. If you read Section 4 of the 14th Amendment, Section 4 in and of itself violates the Supremacy Clause in and of itself. If you cannot give redress of grievances, it does not meet constitutional muster. And no one has been able to give redress of grievances in the 14th Amendment that's been accepted, because basically what Secretary of State William Stewart did was stick his fingers in his ears and say, no, we don't hear you. Well, that doesn't work. But see, here's the problem. Knowing is half the battle. Many people don't know. Now, if you guys are constitutionalists, if you believe in the founding of this nation, then you need to believe in what I'm telling you, man. We have been hijacked. I can tell you how, when, why, show you the documented evidence, and it's like a truck that ran into the mud. If we don't back ourselves up out of the mud and return to the republic form of government, what's coming will be essentially a Marxist government. Whether or not they're strong enough to do it, whether or not we've gone too far, we can either do this. We can stand together and fight for it, or we can hang separately, because that is what will happen.
Well, the plans are very well along the way at this point. When you look at what's already happened, the creation of the police state already here. People say that the police state is coming, but it's here, and it's been here for, I would say, since 2001.
40 years.
Most of Europe, the United States went into a police state, and what's next is just total military. So, completely like the time of Pinochet Bay in Chile. I have family that come from South America. My mom from South America, and a lot of my family lives in America today, and all of South Americans remember what happened to us in the 70s and the 80s with the martial law, and that's what's going to happen to the United States. People getting disappeared in the middle of the night just for minor offenses, and the offenses are determined by your level of support for the government or not. What is coming is a total fascist regime to the United States with a martial law in effect. And also, what is different from what people think of fascism is people think of fascism as inherently anti-Jewish, which is not true. And ultimately, Nazi Germany and
define Jewish
and Zionist Israel connected, but these are false Jews anyway. These are Zionists. This is different. But anyways, what's coming here is going to be similar to that situation that happened back in the 30s. A few adages to this fascist regime come to the United States soon. That is I think most people in the truth movement know that it's very soon, and the plans are well along the way. Now, how do we stop it is the question. And is there any peaceful way at this point? I laugh almost at people that think that wholeheartedly that peaceful opposition will be the savior to the United States and to most of the Western world. It doesn't work that way. The world is way too gritty for that, and only way at this point, I believe, is not peaceful. It's definitely we get a very minimum on the marches.
Never worked.
I think you may be right. You may be right, and I think if I had to give a view of the future, it would be they know that we're awakening. 1, 2. Their media has been rendered irrelevant. I can't tell you how, but on Thursday we'll have a story that we're going to be publishing. It'll probably be one of the most important stories we've ever published. And we'll have more information about that. It's really that big. It's a really kind of a blessing to have the end that we have and the information that we're going to be able to share with people at the highest levels. But that being said, there can be, what I really think is going to happen here is I think the bankers, like they always have for the past 200 years, they know that we're awakening. And it's why we see all of these different revolutionary groups and Soros funding all of these Marxist groups and rising kill whiteys and all that, La Raza, all that stuff. And I think they're going to trigger a banking collapse. I believe that between October of this year and June of the next year will probably be time. And if not, it is based upon the fact that they did completely take out Gaddafi and Saddam. And the reason that I say that is because they were building their currencies backed by gold. They were pulling away from the U.S. dollar. By destroying Gaddafi and Saddam, they may have bought themselves possibly another 4 years, but I don't think so. And I think that what it will come down to is there's going to be, if this happens, people are going to die in droves. Most of the nihilists are going to be destroyed because most of them couldn't handle camping for a day, let alone being out in nature. They're city people, they're city dwellers, and they're going to die in mass numbers, and I think that's probably part of the design. Who knows? But if we maintain this information, and if we get it to as many people in as high position as possible, and we can win their hearts and minds, coming out of that cataclysm, we could rebuild the republic. It could be done. It may be done on small local levels and then people that bind together, but without this history, without the knowledge, and without the understanding of how this happened, we're not going to be able to fix it. There's not going to be a fix. If you don't have something to fall back upon, what do you get to? What's our new theory? The only newest theory out there that kids are grasping onto in droves is Marxism. We have got to resort to traditionalism. We've become the counterculture in a respect, but we have to resort to traditionalism and to the true intent of the Constitution, or we have nothing. Where is our legal framework?
Well, I want to revisit something that something that you mentioned 3 or 4 times throughout the show, and you talk about these people, what you believe to be the agitators, and that the system's using, which it is very evident that these agitators exist in all of the races in the United States in order to drive hatred, division between the races in the United States. But how I've seen it so far, and what somebody that's been closely connected with people that I haven't really been able to actually go to, these different protests and go to these different sites. But I have these. I know journalists that actually get to go to these different sites and actually get to follow the action between Baltimore and Ferguson, and people that actually went and visited. Well, here's my take though. Why? Okay, if these are useful idiots, is what the term that comes to mind when you're describing what you believe these people to be are. And the term comes from Stalin. Stalin used the useful idiots with what he believed would be his plan for dominating the countries that he would take, that he would these converts to Stalinism would be the useful idiots that he would use in order to control a population. if you believe all these people to be useful, would the media need to demonize them the way that they are demonized? For example, it wasn't positive coverage when the Baltimore or Ferguson. In fact, they used fraudulent claims, for example, that they were in pictures that were burning down whole entire stretches of Baltimore, and then you look at the pictures, and these are actually right-wing terrorists in Venezuela rather than protesters in Baltimore. So
Yeah.
I don't see why would they go to this stretch to do that. And also, the Black Lives Matter, I mean, it doesn't seem that I've seen a lot of people from that movement, and they don't seem to be racist and seem to be black separatists, black supremacists, but they rather just seem to be legitimately believe that they are been disenfranchised and that they're fighting for equality. Now, whether you believe their claims to be true or not, they don't have bad intentions, a lot of these people, and the leaders in the core of the movement doesn't seem to be this way. Now, I see these people, agitators, are in the movement to do the will of Soros and other top elites that want to pit the Black Lives Matter against some people, like these neo-Nazi groups or whatever, and they can start some kind of race war, and then you got the La Raza or whatever mixed into the whole mix. And hell, you got some other racial groups and all the other different races that exist. But I just want to hear your take on all that.
First of all, you hit the nail on the head with Soros. Soros is a Marxist communist, and he's fomenting class and racial revolution, the revolution of oppression, and the idea that somehow these kids running around with their iPhones and their Air Jordans and listening to gangster rap or in some meaning are somehow oppressed more than white poor people are in the hills of Tennessee, who, by the way, many of which are the descendants of Irish slaves that we never get to speak about because there were far more white slaves in America than there ever were African slaves. In fact, a lot of the African slaves that think they're African are actually Indian. I just dare anyone to go and look at the Choctaw tribe and their pictures. You'll see what you see today as many African American faces. So they took this sliver of truth, which, by the way, the slave trade was primarily instigated intentionally. These guys were really good. They knew 140 years ahead of time what they could do with things. So you had the Sephardic Jews that, for the most part, now we have their ship manifests that were coming in. Now, why is that important? Because I don't want to make it sound like I'm anti-Semitic, because I'm not. I was raised in a household that was half Roman Catholic and half Talmudic Jewish my whole life. And I learned what was in the Talmud. Why is that important? All of these people, if you look back to their root, they follow certain doctrines and certain concepts, okay? Now, some of these folks that call themselves Jews and are going by this Babylonian Talmudism are, in fact, they're not. And they have many of the Jewish people who have followed the Torah, which is the Old Testament, and really don't know that much about the Talmud. These folks, these Jews, are like everyday people, everyday Americans like you and me. They have their faith. They are the buffer zone. There is an elite ring that has used them and their identity and are like the Rothschilds, like the Rockefellers. And these folks are not Torah Jews. They are following a Babylonian cult, and this cult tells you exactly what they're up to if you just read it. So if you understand the ideology of the nihilists that they're unleashing upon us, and the fact that the Jewish people are often persecuted in mass for the actions of maybe 1.5% of them, and if you consider that 1.5% of the entire Jewish people were already a minority, how many is that? But it should act like the top of the pinhead. Yet, those are the ones that are in control of the banking system and Hollywood and the media, and those are the ones that when you get called, you say, yes, Jews are controlling media. Well, that's only partially true. It's not really accurate. It's a Babylonian cult of Moloch worshippers that say that they're presenting themselves as Jews, but they're not, because they're not following the Torah. As a matter of fact, they'll tell you, there's sections in the Talmud that tell you that the Talmud overrides the Torah. That is blasphemous to the Torah, because the Ten Commandments were, if they're following this doctrine, you have to stick to the Ten Commandments. As soon as you break from the Ten Commandments, you're not following your doctrine. So, again, these are not just Jews. They are people that call themselves Christian. They are people that call themselves Muslim. They are not any of the three. And this is where people get sometimes lost in the whole anti-Semitic thing and going just for the Jews. Well, if you do that, you've fallen into a trap, because the majority of Jews are good people. They're just indoctrinated like Americans are. No different. It's this Babylonian cult, and I can prove this to this day. The same people that worship the bull, that worship Moloch, that go to Bohemian Grove, that do these sacrifices, these are the same people that are involved with the Franklin cover-up and the pedophile scandals, right into the Catholic Church, right into the Jewish faith, right into the Muslim faith. They are Babylonian in origin. They are using these faiths as a mask, and they are essentially acting in manners that cause the people, the average people, the most harm. And when that harm is caused, they use the sympathy of that harm to insulate themselves from any type of criticism. It's very complicated, and that's how they win. And it's a very, very select few. Rothschild, if you look at the Israeli Supreme Court, for instance, completely funded by the Rothschild family. They have Karl Marx Boulevard. It is a national, socialistic, communistic state, yet it's allegedly one of our allies. Folks, there's a problem with that.
Well, are you saying that the Supreme Court is on Karl Marx Boulevard? Is that what you're saying?
What's that? What's that?
You're
saying that again, I couldn't hear.
It's on Rothschild Boulevard. It's the name of the.
Yes, there's Rothschild Boulevard as well. Yep, there's Rothschild Boulevard as well.
And the Knesset the architect of the Knesset was a Rothschild. So, and of course, you look at the what was it? I can't even think of the 1917 of the letter of the Declaration, promise of what Britain promises the Rothschilds, the land of Israel in the future, and eventually that
promised who? Not the Israelites, not the Jews, but the Rothschilds and their central bank. That's why Gaddafi had to go. That's why Saddam had to go. That's why Assad has to go. They're no threat to the United States. We could drop them like a bug. Iran, maybe not so much, because they really do have Russia's protection. If any of those countries, including Iran, ever tried to attack the United States, they would cease to exist with the power that we have. So Rothschild is the linchpin, really, technically. If we really wanted to have as big of an effect, in all reality, the national debt is based upon Article 4 of the 13th Amendment. If you guys get behind me on this and start spreading this information, letting people know, including end-the-Fed individuals who have absolutely no idea that the jurisdiction of the Federal Reserve was created by Section 4 of the 15th Amendment, maybe we would find some solutions by all showing up at congressional hearings and talking ourselves. I can tell you this. I've got people that are going to D.C., and I have people that are doing so in not a capacity yelling at empty buildings, but inside doors, sitting down with people and talking to people in places. Now, if we all did the same thing on a local level, not a national level, just a local level, you take this information and share it with anyone that could reinfect their system with constitutionality. It's how you kind of have to look at yourself as they were the bug at one time. Now they're the host. Now, for us to have any chance at pulling people, and the people who are governing right now are the best targets because they need to have the truth. Without truth, they're just acting on their orders. You have to give them a reason to critically think, because long ago it's been the researching and the searching for it has been drummed out of them by the school systems. How many of us really actually research these documents?
Well, I know that for a fact is that, all these documents, a lot of people have never just plain out heard of them. And it's because what with me, out of all three of us, I've been by far the most recent in high school and in the school system, and I can tell you that it's gotten very bad how they make it seem like this is the ultimate truth. If you question it, you've got a problem of some sort. For example, on the JFK assassination, when the teacher pretty much made it pretty clear to us that if you question it, you're having some kind of psychological phenomena that's not for the good. And in all reality, the same conclusion is that Oswald shot JFK with a magic bullet. And that's just one example of what happened in my time in high school.
When she said that, did you stand up and say, "Yeah, that delusion's called critical thinking"? Did you bother saying something or correcting her? I'm asking for a reason, and it's not. It's a facetious. I did that. I was that crash test dummy, for lack of a better term, who stood up and said stuff like that and was sent to the principal's office. And fortunately, I had a library at home. And I had a father who was a judge who I learned a lot from. And I knew a lot of the things that they were teaching were just flat out false. One of the things we had to do is we had to take our stand.
My last year, that's when I really became like that person that you're describing someone. But the funny thing was that I never really got sent to the office more than just that the teacher, the last social studies teacher I had, he didn't really have much of a spine when it came to standing up to me. He just go quiet and pretend like I didn't say what I just said. Like I'd talk about how Israel was supporting ISIS and stuff like that, and I'd go up. I even one time started drawing a chart on the whiteboard of what the Syrian war and who really supports who, and it was all factual, showing how it's totally different than what the news has claimed to be, and all kinds of other stuff. I mentioned JFK, 9/11. Yeah, he got in the course of 9/11, he got pretty mad. It's I started talking about just the science from the physics, the completely scientific aspect, not even about all the other stuff. I talked a little bit about Silverstein and how he got $4.5 billion for the towers falling down. But it's even funny that even people would be like, one person said that they thought I should be the teacher of the classroom. By the end of the year, I'd said so many things, and he had said just textbook comments, and that's what teachers became. They became like, the newscasters or the news readers. They became the textbook readers. And they're just purely a figurehead, or what they're trained to be, just be a figurehead, and then put any of their own thought into the teaching, none of their own emotion, nothing like that. And it's a completely lame performance all throughout.
And official story. Yeah. Have you? Are you familiar with the FDNY 9/11 recordings of King Street?
I think I know what you're talking about.
That's where they tell them it's fixing to blow. Everybody.
They had two individuals in custody. Now, just to show you how an intelligence op works, just this whole 9/11 thing is a prime example of this jurisdiction muck. Now, they're using different segments of the intelligence apparatus, both I'm sure CIA, FBI, compartmentalized sections of, and Israeli. There were on King Street. There was a bolo that was out for the first band. You've heard of the Dancing Israelis, and everybody's heard of them. But there was no real evidence with them except that they had foreknowledge, which they admitted, that they were there to document the event, which means that they pretty much admitted to knowing it was going to happen. Fox News aired a 4-part special, and I have an opinion as to why they did it in 4 parts, but 140 Israeli students were arrested, the same students that were camped out on one of the floors Silverstein allowed them to camp out. They were allegedly art students from Israel, but they were all found to be spies and penetrated ATF, FBI and whose communications was being paid for by high-ranking neocons in the government, gave the contract to a firm that all of the governmental phone communications were being routed through a corporation through Tel Aviv. And this is all documented fact. So we have this recording on King Street of an arrest of two gentlemen who were driving a van that was ended up being owned by Israeli owner-owned Urban Moving Systems. The same van, by the way, that the guys who were scoping out, who said they had foreknowledge, same company van they were in. This whole fleet of trucks, by the way, the day after 9/11, this was a moving outfit. The entire fleet of trucks disappeared, and the owner disappeared to Israel. That's a fact. Look it up. Urban Moving Systems. Now, so you have this recording. Hold on. So you have this recording of two officers who see. Hold on. Let me finish. You have this recording of two officers that see a van go by with the same description of the same mural that was on the van that they had in New Jersey on this panel truck. So they flip around and they pull the truck over. The two guys go running from it, and they go running after the guys, and the guys detonate the truck on King Street in Manhattan. And that's the audio that you hear. You got two suspects under. Call ESU, the bomb unit. They detonated. My instructors, when I was a fireman in New Jersey, were FDNY Rescue 1. So I had a couple friends up there. I was New Jersey fireman.
You got a link for that, Tom?
Sure. I'll send you links. You want me to play it? You want me to try and play the audio recording?
It's not good. You don't have good enough audio quality.
All right. Well, I'll send it to you. You can share it with your audience. But so we have the evidence of 140 Israeli spies, Israeli communications company intercepting all federal communications, FBI, all that kind of stuff, rerouting it to Tel Aviv. We've got two guys who detonated a truck bomb. We got a trucking company with a fleet of trucks that disappeared. We have Israeli students, some of those 140 arrested in photographs in the Twin Towers with boxes behind them, and the serial numbers on the boxes are detonators, dude. So, I mean, people can ignore this all they want. This was a Bush, Netanyahu coup. I don't want to blame all of Israel, just like I don't want to blame all of the United States. You understand what I'm saying? It's this compartmentalized sections of these collaborators, these PNAC, neoconservative Trotskyite, fake conservatives, what I call neoconservatives, that orchestrated this. So now, if the American people, when they wake up to this, and then they start realizing things like USS Liberty really did happen, weren't an accident, when they start realizing this, they're going to want to wipe Israel off the map. But it's not Israel or the Israeli people that are guilty of it. It's this ring of mafiosos is what I call them. They are literally organized, just like the Italians have an organized criminal element. I'm Italian. I'm not ashamed to say that Al Capone was a scumbag. That doesn't make me anti-Italianic. You know what I'm saying? You call a criminal for what a criminal does. Anybody who didn't commit the crime is innocent. Does that not make sense?
Yeah, though, when you talk about Israel, though, the illegal creation of the state of Israel as a whole, so is guilty of many things. So this thing even existing, you can criticize Israel, but you can't criticize every single person that lives in Israel, but you can criticize Israel as a whole, the creation of its state, and the action that's committed, since including USS Liberty, which was in the war, 2 attacks on our own American soldiers, and the USS Liberty being the more recent one in 1967. I actually interviewed I've interviewed twice USS Liberty survivors, and I believe I've had like 6 or 7 separate survivors in total have been on this show before. In June, I interviewed the first round, and in January, I interviewed 2 more. One came on the show twice, and they tell you, every USS Liberty survivor practically is going to tell you that was not an accident. The people that saw firsthand, and it's obvious, intention, what they were trying to do, what they were trying to drag us into, is that they were going to blame it on Egypt in order to drag us into what would probably become World War III if the United States had joined in the Arab-Israeli War, where Israel committed massive war crimes against the Egyptian people, bombing their hospitals, bombing all kinds of heavily populated areas, just like what they do all the time to the Palestinians by killing them in droves every few years. They decide to start another massacre like what just happened in 2014. And they do isolated events every now and then, killing 10 here, 2 there, and it's just horrific. It's a genocide, and it's the amount of people that died in the Palestinian, the genocide against the Palestinians is the number purported of the Holocaust, 6 million, is the same that probably died over the years. You can calculate all the different stuff, chemical weapons, and all the other usages of genocide. 6 million have probably died since 1948. It's very hard to get that calculation. With all that aside, I want to return back to the Bundy, and it was very specific, straight back to the Bundy Ranch, and the whole Patriot movement has been dubbed in general. With the Bundy Ranch and the Patriot movement in general, do you think that the Bundy Ranch had some of these potential agitators, influence from the outside, and possibly, in lack of a better term, the useful idiots might have been there in order to make these people that make the movement look bad?
My opinion is this, and this has been my opinion since almost the beginning, and it made me in some ways, very difficult to break through and get close to the Bundys and be honest with them about what my thoughts were. But one of the things that I was most concerned about with everything that I saw was that I saw these people as the obvious people who would stand up in opposition of federal tyranny. Historically, the Mormon people look to the Constitution as divine as the Bible. And they can let you go so far, but when so much has occurred, and this is played out in history, time and time again, sagebrush rebellion, all this kind of stuff. You push them to a point, and they will stand up. And in my opinion, coming in with complete brown uniforms, brown shirts, with German shepherds, the whole 9 yards, all a part of a larger psyop played upon the Bundys. I don't believe the Bundys are complicit in a psyop. I believe that the Bundys and Emmon and Ryan later, because what they did was they stood down at Bundy and they let time pass, and then the federal judge said, when the Hammonds were there, he said, I cannot in good conscience give them the mandatory minimum. To do so would be a shock upon the conscience. Okay, this was the exact moment that certain operatives that I know that exist within our federal government, these compartmentalized factions, used to instigate and trigger something to happen. Maybe even putting out or providing financial assistance in ways that may not have seemed as though they were coming from the federal government. I do know that Emmon believed that it was a righteous cause. I do believe that if somebody had offered him financing to make it work, he probably would have viewed it as an act of God. I don't believe Ammon in any way, shape, or form, in his mind, in his heart, or Ryan, are in any way complicit with the psychological operation. In any way. Now, I got to know LaVoy. I don't believe at this point in any way, shape, or form that LaVoy was involved in any kind of psychological operation. I believe him to be real. However, media was very difficult, and they were very hesitant in trusting media. However, certain individuals had trust that were doing damage. That concerned me. The damage that I'm referring to specifically was certain coverage that Brandon Curtis and Pete Santilli did with the signed Patriot I hate to say this, dildo auctions. When at the time Ammon and Ryan were trying to elicit the support of Mormon Christian ranchers to stand up with them, I can promise you that after going around town, and nobody wanted to go on the record, I can promise you that after that incident and after that video floated around Burns, Ammon and Ryan lost a huge amount of local support. Because Pete was, in a way, acting as the voice of citizens for constitutional freedom, or at least presented himself in a manner of which he was aligning himself with the group. Now, one of the reasons why I said from the beginning that I support Ammon and Ryan ideologically, their beliefs in the Constitution and their version of the Constitution, their outlook on the Constitution, to a degree, except for the point of accepting Bar Association attorneys and turn themselves down that rabbit hole. Their hearts and their minds, I believe, almost in like they were created knowing that at some point they could be used as triggers because they're honorable men. You can only push an honorable man so far. When you really have somebody who really believes in honor and justice like these men do, they will die for it. They've historically died for it. We come from stock of people like that. Well, their flavor of it is Mormonism. Our flavor of it is more constitutionalism. You can call it whatever it is you want. My family, I come from a direct family that goes back prior to the founding of the Republic, all the way up in Salem and Fall River, Massachusetts. Borden, Dodson, Stewart, Crandall. You know, you can look these names up. These are my uncles that fought for the Revolution, that fought for the in the Civil War, on actually both sides, in every war. Okay? We were raised with this patriotic spirit that if you came to our house in a SWAT team, brother, that would be the last time you came out. That's the way I was raised. I mean, that was unheard of because we were law-abiding people. We would never transgress upon anyone, so we didn't expect to be transgressed upon. Well, the Bunnies were raised in an ideology that takes this to a religious pinnacle. So in my opinion, the federal government and certain individuals within probably the intelligence communities knew that they could trigger the secondary movement and then go back and back-charge them and show them as an example to any other patriotic group that might think of standing in opposition to this federal jurisdiction. In my opinion, they were played. That's my outlook.
Yes, definitely I believe Pete Santilli's role in all of this, and people that have listened to Voice of Rebellion radio for any time, especially the last few weeks because of his name came up a couple times, but Pete Santilli, my personal opinion, is not too high of him, and his new network that puts all these theories out there that I believe are just to make the whole people that are truth seekers, truth movement, just to make them all look very silly. I mean, I've literally seen stuff about like flying out of caves and stuff like that on Before It's News. Or I have another term for it, but I decided to keep this.
Oh yeah, like Dr. William Mount. Dr. William Mount is a perfect example. Now, this guy, he said a lot of things that may come to pass, may not come to pass. But have you seen any of this guy's videos?
Yeah,
I don't know if you're right. You're vaguely familiar with. I know. Okay, so Pete, he'll go and he'll put out the truth that we have right here, and then he started putting out William Mount stuff, and I'd call him up and say, "What are you doing, dude? What? That's not truth. That's not documented. This dude has dreams, man. What are you putting out there?" Another thing that happened, and I'm going to be completely open and honest about this, when he went live on the radio in Ohio, he called me up and he said, "Look, we'd like to have you on either weekly or bi-weekly to do, Constitution." He wanted to do this thing. Really, it kind of came from our side anyway, but he kind of jumped on county by county. And he wanted to promote this, county by county takeover. But then again, he would go out there and he would tell all of his listeners to assault a certain military-style cargo container that is, that they ship arms in. And they're saying, he said, if you see this anywhere, seize it and pass out all the firearms to the people, of course. Like, are you serious? Dude, Anyway, to make a long story short on the whole Pete Santilli thing, he calls me up and he says, look, we'd like to have you on. He said, but there's one thing. He said, you're going to have to be nice to our friends with the funny hats. And, you know, being funny, I said, what, you mean the Cardinals? And he said, no, our other friends with the funny hats. I said, well, they're the same thing. So he was trying to trap me like I was some kind of anti-Semite or something. Like I don't look at all of the evil as being equally evil. But still, more disturbing is that I have to silence my opinion on anything Israeli-related now that he's on what? Mainstream media. Nobody can tell me who controls the media. They can kiss my rosy red, you know what. So anyway.
Yeah, it reminds me of what's happened recently with, you know, Alex Jones and his, you know, is that he's not only never really talked about it ever to get to the point that he's gotten to in the last 20 years. He's went from being, you know, a very start with some public access guy, and because he never touched a few subjects, they let him get up to the point where he's on FM radio and all of these places. Yeah, more viewers and listeners practically than you know, a lot of major mainstream media shows, and it's because he doesn't touch a certain somebody that starts with an I. Israel.
Let me get some.
You know, the funny thing is, he started off with the owner of my network. He started off on my owner's network.
Yeah. Well,
that's great.
Santilli and AJ, no doubt. Hey, let's bring it back in. Let's go back to Bunkerville. The killers. They're.
You know, I'm also in Austin too, right?
Say again.
I'm right where InfoWars is. We're in Austin.
Anyways, so back to Bunkerville. The killers there that killed the police officers in Vegas. They had their camp there.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, so
I met that guy.
Yeah.
Not only did I meet that guy, I was one of the 3 people that went running in 3 different directions to go get people to get him the hell out of there. Dude. When I met him I basically volunteered my medical services because I'd been a firefighter. They had a little chow hall there at the Bundy Ranch, and they had a little medical section, so I volunteered for that. Well, somebody came and grabbed me and said, come check this guy out. And I went to the chow hall, and I sat down, was sitting down eating a meal. He was starving. He was scarfing down food, and he sat down and talked with him. Dude, this guy was out of it. The dude that I saw doing the video interview was not the same person that I was talking to in the chow hall. This dude was crackers, dude. He could not string together 3 coherent sentences when I tried talking to him. I don't know whether his pupils were not dilated. It did not look like he was under the effect of any known narcotic that I know of. His pupils weren't wide at all, so he wasn't tripping when I talked to him. So I don't know what his deal was, but he all of a sudden showed up with this brand new shirt with the opposition name of the guy that was running against the sheriff in Clark County at the time. If you go back and watch the video of the report, I'm sure you're familiar with the video that he did at the Bundy Ranch. The media ran that like crazy. Look at the shirt that he's wearing. He's wearing the opponent sheriff's brand new campaign shirt. There's no accident to that.
What's Gordon?
When we saw this guy, he was dirty. He didn't have any clean clothes. This guy pops up with a brand new campaign shirt.
Yeah, what was
I
his
never saw him.
What? It's at the tip of my tongue. What was his name? Gordon Martinez or Martin?
Yeah, Gordon Martinez. I did an interview with him. There's videos of it on YouTube with Gordon in our hotel room in Bunkerville. Yep.
Here we go. Martinez.
Yep. Then this idiot. Then it gets deeper than that. He shows up. When he goes out to Las Vegas, he didn't have a pot to piss in, right? So Stuart Rhodes, wanting to get him out of there.
This is
what I understand.
JJ.
What's that?
This is for my good friend James Freeland. Go ahead about Rhodes, fellas, and him passing some money along there.
Yeah, for or against. This is what I know of to be what I believe to be the facts. This came from, I was standing next to the command tent, so I was hearing what was going on whether I wanted to or not. And I haven't reported on this. It wasn't a big thing, but, you know, looking back on it, it is what it is. So Stewart, allegedly, he either gives them money or he sends somebody, takes them down to town, and they go get some clothes in a hotel room. That's the last we hear or see them. Next we hear or see them, there's the Las Vegas incident, and from what I heard in Las Vegas, the place that they were staying, they didn't have much money. I mean, or at least they told people they were staying, but they didn't have, you know, any money. All of a sudden, he shows up with a bag full of ammunition. Anybody that goes shooting at all knows that just a box or two of ammunition is going to cost you these days $40, $50. So where did all that money come from? Where did the ammunition come from?
Well, there's this Gordon Martine. He campaigned on the exposing the corruption inside the Metropolitan Police Force. So I'm not.
He's on this network now, by the way, just so you guys know.
That was paid for him to go get a motel. Then they show up in Vegas over the part of town where I'm from. My cousin's a cop there. He worked with these same guys that were killed. So anyways, they're there. Yeah,
Please tell him my condolences. Please make sure you tell him my condolences. Those officers, I don't know what went down, but nobody deserves to be executed ever.
Yeah, I
don't want to say that, but they did.
No, and it's my opinion that there was somebody that was handling them and feeding them meth. They exhibited definite signs of being meth heads, and to freak out like that, and they certainly weren't a part of any of the people that took part in Bunkerville. And we all was set ourselves to watching for the people that were out of place like that, and so he was spotted. That the people there were not willing to go out and just start shooting cops. I'm going to tell you that right there. They were
no. As a matter of fact, when we met with several times, I was there when they met with different officers, and it was handshakes, and it was respectful, and they were. I mean, don't get me wrong, resolute, but very respectful. No, they did. The way the Bundys looked at the cops was that they were just propagandized Americans that were. They know what time it is. They know what cultural Marxism has done. They know how close they are to California. And Harry Reid, Lord, don't get me started with that corrupt bastard. And his son Rory, that's just, you're talking about gangsters, okay? And they're using their Mormon faith in ways that are, I'm surprised the Mormons are letting them get away with it, but that's a whole other story. I just don't understand how they can let one of their own stay in good standing and commit criminal activity, but it is what it is.
So what about the Western state movement?
I believe in COWS, Coalition of the Western States.
Yeah, even beyond that, even to, I think it's a religious belief in a sense of the Western states kind of forming their own union. A breakaway at the actual lawful or whatever United States, as in
what you're talking about involved with doing something like that would require the same level, or actually maybe not more, it would require more effort than our solution. Our solution would essentially do the same thing without the requirement for an Article 5 convention that would be extremely dangerous. An Article 5 convention with as many Marxists that exist today could be disastrous. Without the need of an Article 5 convention, without secession, if we made people understand the nature of the jurisdiction that they're living under is not a country called the United States, that's all you need. They need to declare their independence and their sovereignty. They need to claim their state citizenship status. It is a political choice. You see, these folks, when they did this, and one of the reasons why I was allowed to walk from that municipal courtroom is that what they have is called the Repatriation Act. Okay, let me explain that real quick. They had to leave a back door for themselves, their families, and their progeny, and whoever was self-governing in the aspect well enough to return back to the republic form of government. They had to. That's the way they got away with not committing a crime. You see, if they leave you a way out and you leave it to your own consent, it's very hard to convict one of these senators of a crime. They did so as lawyers because my father is a judge and I understand the way laws are written and the definitions of legal definitions having any completely different added definitions to what many people consider. That's how they did it.
Let me stop you. You got a lot of good stuff there, but we're running out of time. We've got like 10 minutes left. Let me pull you around real quick. What was his Little Bill famous for setting traps for illegal aliens down on the border? He seemed to be a big part of the confusion and the breakup and the accusation against people. They really started segregating. They broke it up in there. There were several people involved. Let me go to him before we run out of time. Let me ask you.
You went to jail over the Red River incident?
Did he? I haven't followed the guy. He's an idiot.
I didn't need to know what we're talking about.
Little Bill, he said, I don't know if he went down Texas or not. He probably went down on the border after to stand guard and guard their fences there. But he was down before. He was in a Playboy interview, made famous for setting human traps along the border, I guess, is his claim to fame.
Well, I don't know much. That was before I got to Texas. And I don't recall much of it. I know that there was an incident down by the Red River that was another...
All right, we'll pass on him right now. What about Louis Prepper? He's slammed over Mardigan, accused of being on meth. He seemed to be a dissenter in there.
What I call him is Screwy Louie. I named him, by the way, long ago when he first showed up at the Bundy Ranch. He left out. He accused people of stealing their stuff, which is not true. There was stuff that was left that was locked in one of the Bundy's buildings so that it wouldn't be stolen. But he came back, and the Bundys weren't there. He brought the police with him, first of all, which could have been potentially explosive. He brought them right to the edge of the militia camp, and he had people searched, claiming that that his stuff was stolen, even though the people that were there had absolutely nothing to do with locking his stuff up, making all kinds of outlandish allegations. I have a video that I published called Screwy Louie. If you want to Google RTR Truth Media Screwy Louie, it'll probably pop right up. And there's a video of him with the cops that he brought. And you can hear how he's talking. Well, we don't want to cut the communication lines down, and we don't want to cut the supply lines down, and this dude thought he was General Ulysses S. Grant.
Yeah, we had generals showing up there in all the dissension there. There were some nutters, really some nutters that showed up. But,
oh yeah, yep, and that's going to be par for the course.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to get a few words in here towards the end of the show. Is that, it appears that, and it was good that I was able to ask that major question about the, use of who was actually involved in the 150 people, because that's been a question that's been kind of resurfaced on the alternative media, is that whether the core of the movement or there are people that were planted that did some of the actions that were not very beneficial for the movement, and it appears, and I would believe so, in a movement of 150 people, that probably at least one or two plants in there somewhere, that there were plants. And I just want to make corrections on what I said earlier, is that I said that back when I said that the Israeli Supreme Court was on Rothschild before, it's the Israeli Knesset, and the declaration I was looking for was a Balfour Declaration, which I've said 50 times, but for some reason right then it just completely eluded me. So with all that, so you, in your heart, you truly believe that the most
the thing that we can do to stop people that, like I said, are connected, and all of the people that killed 6 million in the 30s in the Holocaust and killed 6 million the Palestinians over the years, that we can stop these people that started all these wars, and tens of millions have died over the years because of them. We're talking about that the elites and the system that they built in the United States and the Western world, that via the declaring ourselves to be sovereign, that's our best plan of action.
Well, truth is rising. I can tell you that because there are more conservatives, and I call myself now. I don't even really identify as a conservative because I don't even like the word anymore, but a traditionalist. You'll find many traditionalists that used to be Republicans, conservatives, or still call themselves that, or libertarian, that are awakening to the threat of our partnership with Israel. Only logistically speaking, let's keep it just right there. Our interests are not Israel's interests. Israel's interests are not our interests. Our interests have always been and should always be our borders and our economy. I agree with a certain degree of preserving the integrity of your economy if there's an exterior threat trying to undermine your economy. I don't agree with taking out foreign leaders without congressional oversight and assassinating them and causing what was the highest living standards in all of Africa now to descend into third world country status, or blowing up their aqueduct program that basically essentially took desert that was unable to be used by any stretch or purpose.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining the call. It's been Tom Lockevar Stewart, Resurrect the Republic, Dirty Uncle Sam, Truth
God bless.
Podcast. Appreciate you tuning in. This is my farewell for a while. My last cast, my next cast will have a hook and a worm on the end of it. So I'll be back in a couple of weeks with some videos. And anyways, thanks, Chris. I've really enjoyed being a part of it. When I circle back around and find myself, we'll get back together and see where I can lend a hand again. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Tom. I'll hand you the mic.
God bless you, man.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Tom. Lacaro.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tom. For some reason, that last name, I want to pronounce it like a Spanish name.
Stewart will work, man.
But anyway, thanks, Vince, for all the help that you've lended me over the last few months, and also for arranging this great interview that we've had. And it was pretty. I would say that we had some very good intellectual conversation during this interview. And we're wrapping this up. We got less than 2 minutes left on the of the show before we reach the bumper. Vince, yes, when you get back around into the radio sphere again, definitely just give me a call or whatnot. Just hit me up. We're gonna go to the next project. More information about the next week's show will be definitely put up by Wednesday, and that'll be probably the day I put it up. And thanks everyone for tuning in to Voice of Rebellion Radio here at UCY.TV. Also on, not just UCY TV, Real Liberty Media, freedomsnetwork.com, and a few other sources, plus our YouTube that we put up in about 30 minutes after the show. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and have a good night. All the people down here in Florida, stay safe, take precaution. And also to all the other people that didn't miss part of the show, catch the YouTube later on the archive and watch all 2 hours of this great interview. And again, one more thanks out there to my good producer, Vince Eastley, and our guest, Tom, here. Talk about the Bundy Boys, and also a lot about sovereignty and our national rights, and many other just talking about. We got into a lot of stuff in the show. One of the most productive interviews I think I've had in my time as a radio show host.
Thank you.
Also,
Point of no return and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds him. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return, and if I back down